Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Revolution Recap. The Revolution were tough luck losers on Saturday afternoon as a ninth-minute red card to Antonio De La Mea and a last-minute penalty kick resulted in a 2-1 defeat at Yankee Stadium. The Revs started strong with a second-minute goal from Juan Fernando Caicedo, but playing down a man for most of the game, NYCFC came crawling back, striking in the 70th and 95th minute. The loss drops the Revs to 7th place in the Eastern Conference for the moment, and with the loss, the Revs only have 6 points in their last 6 games. I'm Greg Johnstone. Joining me today is Sean Donahue, and we also have the refereeing expert on the line today, fan of the 1-0 Philadelphia Eagles, Jake Catanese is joining us from his car on speakerphone. Jake, how's it going today?
Yeah, hold on. You're gonna lead in with the Eagles and not the incredibly Antonio Brown-led New England Patriots?
Well, we're going to get to that after you get off the phone because we want to, we want to have a positive spin on things, and I know you're just going to rain on our parade. So,
well, I'm going to rain on a different parade, but yeah, I'm actually qualified to rain on that first one.
well, let's get right to it. I think everyone who is listening to this has probably seen the play. Antonio De La Mea sent off for barely a foul. It seemed like taking down an NYCFC attacker. Really. The call was, I guess it was because he was the last man back, but it seems like there was very minimal contact. It was an extremely harsh foul and an extremely harsh red card, and it obviously had a significant impact on the game. So, Jake,
right off the bat, it's not a foul, and Antonio De La Mea plays the ball more than I don't remember the attacker for New York City offhand. I don't know if the attacker misses the ball, if it bounces, but I do know that effectively it looks like De La Mea passes the ball or plays the ball more or less backwards, whether it's intended for Matt or whether it's just intended to get away from the attacker, is neither here nor there. If, and I don't believe that this is a foul, if you want to say that it is an obstruction foul after the fact, that's fine. But to go back on VAR and say that Antonio De La Mea is a last attacker, and that is a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. It is a laughable decision and a laughable interpretation of what I believe is the laws for the denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. The New York City attacker does not have possession of the ball, nor is he likely to gain possession of the ball in a manner that is going to threaten the goal. At best, he's going to have the ball in the corner. The ball or the play is not going towards goal. It's going towards the end line at the parallel of the box. And for that matter, I don't think that there's any way you can review that play, which the only reason they reviewed it was, I believe, to determine whether or not De La Mea was the last attacker. Instead of looking at the entire play as a whole, and in my opinion, should have erased the yellow card, they review the play, determine Antonio is the last man, which, again, is not the only requirement for denial of a goal-scoring opportunity, and they send off Tony in the 9th minute and effectively ruins whatever game plan they had for New England. I think it's a decision New England should appeal. I think it's a position that will be overturned, but we cannot have, in the era of VAR, a mistake like that. In the way that the game works now. You're going to make a decision like that, you've got to be absolutely certain on VAR that it is the correct decision in all facets, and I don't believe that due diligence was done on that review. I believe the review was only there so that Sylvia Petrescu could determine, oh yeah, he was the last man, forgetting the fact there's 2 defenders in the middle of the box, forgetting the fact the ball is nowhere near or nowhere going towards goal. I think it's a poor decision. And I think it shouldn't even have to be appealed. It should just be overturned. But we know that's not how the disco and everyone's going to make it work. New England's going to have to review this on their own and likely get it overturned. And that's a shame because Bruce Arena said it. It ruined what could have been a very good game and a very good benchmark for how far New England has come. Instead, we don't learn a whole lot from the game.
Yeah, and it should be noted, too, I'm looking at this, and Castellanos, who's the NYCFC attacker, he almost misses the ball. Tony De La Mea kind of kicks it away, and then, almost bracing for himself, De La Mea kind of gets a forearm on Castellanos' back, and Castellanos goes down extremely easy. So even if you want to call that a foul, it's a bit of a ticky-tack foul to lead to a red card and have that big of an impact on the whole game. Seems pretty severe. And I agree with you, Jake. I would imagine this should be overturned. I'm not sure if MLS will be that. They have defended their referees in the past, so I would not be shocked if this isn't overturned, but it certainly should be.
You can absolutely go through, and I think I have to remember again. I think there's a vote that I believe the Revs team or Jeff Lemieux has put out that clearly shows. I believe Castellanos kind of going over the bar or kind of skipping over his foot, and then Tony clearly playing the ball. And again, when you have a VAR review like this, it not just be for whatever piece of information that you need. The VAR review is the entire play. And to have a VAR review at this stage of the game and of this magnitude, to have that little oversight or that little discretion on, well, I called a foul, I issued a yellow card, now I know he's the last man, he's off. That's not the way the review system should be working. The review system should be there to make sure that those types of plays are correct. And to have a VAR review go from what should not be a foul to a yellow card to then review to a red card should get someone not so much in trouble, but whoever the VAR guy is, he's not working a playoff game now. If this comes back and gets overturned, Petrescu and the VAR guy at most should get one playoff assignment, and that's it. And Petrescu's a veteran. Petrescu's a guy you could pencil in to work what would have been, I would say, one of the semifinal conference legs, but we don't have those anymore. These are big decisions that affect playoff assignments, that affect player contracts for 2020, that affect coaching contracts for 2020. In the era of VAR, we cannot have mistakes that lead to calls getting overturned on appeal, because that's an egregious system mistake within the system. That when you have all these reviews, when you have the ability to look at plays and slow things down, to just, I assume, look at the one wide angle and go, yep, Tony's the last guy. There's no one, he's keeping everyone on side. He's the last defender. To be the only thing that as far as I can tell, that you checked, because the review took about 10 seconds from the stadium when I was there. That's got to be something that gets looked at. And I know we don't want to have reviews go on forever, but when you review a play, you have to review the entire play, not just the one thing that you're looking for. You have to make sure that all facets of the play are correct and are what you called. And if that means you got to take a yellow card off the board because you got it wrong, that's what you should be doing. You shouldn't be going back and saying, well, I believe this was a tactical foul, and then go on review and say, no, we got this wrong. That should be the outcome. Because on appeal, if the IRB or the review panel looks at that play and overturns it, it means that somewhere along the VAR process failed. And the VAR process cannot fail in early September. It can fail in early March, and we can learn from it. It can't fail in early September, can't fail in October. And if it is, we're going to have bigger problems then.
Yeah, VAR has not been a very good experience in MLS, and it seems to always come back to bite the Revs in the most unfortunate ways. And it arguably could have cost them 3 points on Saturday. So, hey, Jake, before we let you go, do you have any other complaints about the refereeing outside of this play? I think both teams were quite not unsatisfied with the performance from the man in charge yesterday.
And we need to give Silvio Petrescu the following little caveat. I want to remind everyone this game is being played on the postage stamp known as the Yankee Stadium infield. The Yankee Stadium infield is not a viable way to judge or get consistent refereeing. It's basically going to be chaos. The goal of the referee then should be to manage that chaos, because almost every other foul that occurs at Yankee Stadium, you could argue, is tactical. Because of the size of the field, because of how many players are next to each other, getting breakaways and things like that are going to be common. Why? Just the way you saw in the New England's goal, the play that Tony ends up with the red card. When you get a ball over the top, when you get things like that, it's always going to be usually in an isolated situation. So we need to recognize, particularly at Yankee Stadium, that particular condition and field state exists, and to not overreact and card everything that you normally would on a regulation-sized field. We need to dial back the expectations and the punishment, because a lot of those things are going to be more fouls. You need to be a little bit more cautious on when you start dishing out your consistent infringement yellows and things like that. Aside from that, I think the penalty to Andrew Farrell is accurate currently. He slid for the ball. He missed. I don't think he got really much of the player. The player more ran into him afterwards. I view that more as obstruction than I do trip. I would like to see that play again from Petrescu. He signals a goal kick, which I don't know how you have a goal kick from that position. You're basically saying that the other guy kicked it last, when really what you should be doing is saying, well, Farrell broke up the play somehow. It should be a corner. I think the penalty is fine. I would like to in the future see that play called as obstruction and have that be an indirect free kick, not a penalty kick, because I don't think that Andrew really affects the player directly. He affects the direction the player needs to go, but for the most part, that's consistent with the way the game is now. But yeah, it's a hard luck 2-1 loss. It probably should not have been a 2-1 loss, but given the state the Revolution were in for the final 80 minutes, you'd be hard pressed to hold off a team like New York City, even on a small field like that, for 80 minutes. I forget the shot numbers. What was it, 10 of 30 on Matt's net?
Yeah, they had 30 shots, 10 on net, I think. I believe you're right.
That's a lot. And I know that one of those is a penalty, and I know that one of those is almost guaranteed to go in. That's a lot to have Matt Turner do over the final 80 minutes and get out of there with the result. So disappointing for fans like me who were there, and the people on the buses that went down for several hours. Another scenic, wonderful trip through Connecticut. And yeah.
No trip through Connecticut is scenic, Jake. No, let's not get carried away here. But before we let you go, one more question. We had a lot of questions today because obviously you can imagine that a lot of people are mad at refereeing in MLS. A lot of people are wondering if there's going to be any changes, or do you think anything could change the incompetence of the MLS referees, or do you know if there's a reason to why they are this poor? Because it seems like it's becoming a worse and worse issue as time goes on.
I think, just like with anything, VAR needs time to develop and to grow as a system, as people use it. It needs to be refined. What reviews are we actually looking for? What should be reviewed? What shouldn't be reviewed? When a play gets reviewed, making sure that all aspects of the play are reviewed, not just the one question or the answer that we're looking for. I don't think you should be reviewing offsides like the way that you do in hockey, where it's like, oh my God, a little bit of the skate was not on the blue. Oh my God, it overturned the goal. No, we don't want that. We don't want that. We want something a little bit more freer than that. We don't need the rules or the reviews to be precise. We need them to be consistent, and that's always should be the goal. Right or wrong in the laws of the game are a gray area. We need the calls from the officials to be as consistent as possible, because that's where the controversy is not when we perceive mistakes. It's when we look at something and go, well, 6 people did it this way, and you're the one guy who did it wrong or did it differently, which I perceive as wrong. Why? And I think if you go back and look at this play, you're going to look at it and go, we've seen this foul all the time. It may be a yellow card. I think for the most part, it's probably should just be not even a foul. It should be whatever the ball went to, back to Matt Turner. That should be the play. You want to call it a foul? Yeah, it's fine. No one's going to kill you. But on, like I said, when you have these reviews, when you have these situations, and everything's under a microscope, you have the ability to view all aspects of the play, and you need to review all aspects of the play while you're doing it. So that's something that I think the league needs to really grow from is, hey, we're checking for offside. What you should also be checking for while you're there is, did a foul occur behind the play? Did anyone else impede the ball from an offside position? You shouldn't just be looking at this guy, we want to make sure he got the ball, he got the shot off, we want to make sure he was offside. No, you need to make sure all facets of the play are legal, not just the ones that are obvious and right in front of you. And I think as MLS referees and as referees, FIFA referees in particular, around the world use the system more often, they're going to get better at it. It's not going to be an overnight process, and I think we need to remember that. But at the same time, like I said, you cannot, under any circumstances, have a video review that is some type of, particularly a red card, getting overturned on appeal, because that is about as egregious an error as you can have in a system where you should be making fewer, I want to say mistakes, but there should be fewer inconsistencies with how the league wants things called, how FIFA wants things called, and in generally how referees call things from game to game and week to week, which we know is not going to be perfect, but we can't have wild swings like we've been seeing, particularly in MLS.
And hopefully it doesn't come back to haunt us in the playoffs, because as you said, these are issues that should be handled in March and not in September and October in the midst of a tough playoff run. So, hey, Jake, I appreciate you calling in and giving us your input as the refereeing expert. Obviously, that was a big point to this game, and your expertise is greatly appreciated.
Yeah, we're going to go a little bit more into detail, in particular, the specific, four classifications and four ways that a denial of goal scoring opportunity occurs, and we'll go into more details into why I don't think the call should consistently be considered a red card. But there's more nuance to it than just that. But Monday or Tuesday, I'm off this week. We'll have a little bit more in writing for those of you who really want to dig into the law book and figure out, well, how obvious does a denial of the goal scoring opportunity need to be? I'm telling you kids right now, 9 times out of 10, it is pretty obvious. This is the one time out of 10 where, no, we need to do our due diligence and make sure what we're calling is right.
And that'll be up on the Bent Musket, Jake?
Of course.
No. All right. Well, Jake, thanks very much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you, guys.
See you. All right, Sean, you've been waiting patiently for your input. Do you have anything to add to the ninth minute red card there? I think we're kind of in agreement that was a pretty egregious call that did not help the refereeing. The referee was wrong. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that. But one point that Jake did make that I wanted to touch on really quickly is I could completely agree with him that playing at Yankee Stadium kind of affects everything, and I think it's the worst situation in MLS when you talk about stadiums and playing surfaces. The novelty of seeing a team play at a baseball stadium has long ago worn off. So I can't wait for someday when they can hopefully get a stadium that's not playing at Yankee Stadium. It kind of completely impacts the game. But the only thing I would add to what Jake said, and I mostly agree with him completely, is I don't think the two defenders. First of all, I don't think it was a foul. And if it was a foul, it was a situation where De La Mea had won the ball and then followed through a bit with his arm. So I don't think you can call that dogso. But if you're giving the referee the benefit of the doubt and somehow he didn't see that De La Mea had won the ball, I don't think those other two defenders were in a good position to actually get back and defend if you look at the play. I do think I can kind of see the justification if you were to say that was a foul on why you would call that perhaps a denying of an obvious goal-scoring opportunity. But when you factor in the fact that De La Mea had kicked it away and had a clean tackle to begin with, that kind of throws it all out the window. So, I think we're all in agreement that was a terrible call. On the penalty kick play, I also agree with Jake. I think it was the right call, and I think it was a position where there was no reason at all where Andrew Farrell needed to slide in like that. And, it's hard for me to to say too much negative about the Revolution in a game when you've played down a man for 81 minutes. It's almost inevitable that you're going to find a way to lose that game when you get a red card so early. But it was really unfortunate that the Revolution held on for so long. We're in such a good position to get a point, and then Farrell kind of slid in a position where he really had no need to slide in, and it led to that penalty kick call. So, credit to the Revolution for holding on as long as they did, but that was sloppy play by Farrell at the end there.
And we're going to kind of do today a little bit differently today. There's not a whole lot we can take away from a game where you're down a man 80 minutes. The Revs parked the bus, and we'll kind of get into, I think, a lot of the main questions through listener questions. So we'll skip over our key takeaways. But before we get into listener questions, I think one person that we need to give a lot of credit for, and certainly he has no blame yesterday since he went off with a 1-0 lead and was the lone goal scorer for the Revs. But Juan Fernando Caicedo too, with his coveted 5th goal of the season, now making that over-under line I set from at the beginning of the year a solid push. So you and Seth can breathe a little easier, Sean. But JFC scores his 5th goal of the season in the 2nd minute. Sean, do you want to heap some praise for JFC in this game? I thought he was pretty well overall and obviously taken off due to circumstance, but really solid shift from him, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, I want to praise him, and I kind of want to praise Arena for, going into this game. This was the lineup that I thought the Revolution should put out there. Given the circumstances, I think we talked a little bit about it last week that I thought, Caicedo #2 should start this game, and it paid off in just the second minute with that goal. It was one of those plays where when you see it happening in real time, and you see Caicedo, out in front of his man with an opportunity to kind of run in a low and on goal, the defender's going to catch up to him because of the way Juan Caicedo runs. We talked before about he's, an awkward runner and not the fastest guy on the pitch. So there was that moment there where like, oh crap, he's going to mess this up somehow, isn't he, with his speed? But he used his strength instead of his speed to kind of hold off the man, and the defender slipped, and it was, great finish from him. So it's, disappointing and no fault of his own that he had to be subbed out in the 21st minute, because it would have been nice to see what the Revolution could do with him on the field for a longer period of time. The only thing I will say here, and that hasn't been brought up yet, is you can't take a lot away from this game because of the red card. But even if the red card hadn't happened, I think you wouldn't be able to take a lot away from this game because New York City FC was missing about six starters on that that lineup. So it was really a very weak New York City FC team, which put the Revolution in a position where they could. You thought they could go into New York City and get a win and really help their playoff chances and their playoff positioning. Which is what makes it even more disappointing how this game played out, because the Revolution got off to a great start. It was a game you thought they could had a chance to win, and they were doing everything right early on. So just disappointing the way that played out. But I think no matter how this game played out, it would be hard to take away too much one way or the other, given all the circumstances.
And I think the only thing you could really take away from this game is something that we already knew, and that is that Matt Turner might be one of the best keepers in MLS. Certainly was thrown to the wolves yesterday, being down a man, and the Revs defense certainly did not make it easy for him. Opta's expected goals for NYCFC in this game was 4, and the Revs conceded 2, one of which was on the penalty kick there. So Matt Turner, even though he conceded twice and did not get the win, still had a stellar performance in his Yankee Stadium debut. Of course, Matt Turner is a Yankee fan from New Jersey. Unfortunately, that's his one flaw. But really, really solid game for Matt Turner yesterday, and he continues to climb the ranks of the MLS goalkeepers, in my opinion. He's having an astounding 2019 season, and I don't know if you have any thoughts on Matt Turner on that, Sean.
No, he had a great game, and he could not have been more left out to dry on that first goal, certainly when there were, I think, 3 guys behind the defense open in the box for that cross. Barring a absolute horrible mistake from the striker or whoever was in the box in that play, the goalkeeper's going to have no chance there. And then, of course, on a penalty kick, it's always a crapshoot. So no fault at all on Matt Turner on either of those 2 goals, and he made some big saves to keep the game closer than it perhaps could have been, and to keep the Revolution in a lot longer. Again, it's just a shame that kind of an ill-advised tackle from Andrew Farrell led to them not getting a point out of this game.
Yeah, not even Matt Turner can stop a 4-on-0 break. That was certainly his defense leaving him out to dry. And yeah, as you said,
what happened?
That was just a total breakdown all the way around. And it was clearly not offsides either. It was a pretty clean goal. That just everyone seemed to fall asleep on. And then Andrew Farrell, who I thought had a pretty decent game overall on the day too. He 6th career assist for him yesterday, by the way. I believe that's his first ever playing center back. But yeah, obviously a huge mistake by Andrew Farrell in the 95th minute, a bit uncharacteristic of him. I can't tell if he just mistimed his tackle or what happened there, but conceding that penalty late on a play that really wasn't going to result in a major chance. It wasn't a clear and obvious opportunity. Really, his defense really let down Matt Turner yesterday. So let's head over to listener questions just because we're kind of moving along, and we have a banner ceremony to watch in a few minutes, Sean, so we'll get through this really quick. A lot of people obviously upset about the refereeing, as I kind of alluded to when we're talking to Jake. Zach Grimes says that NFL refs are crap. Revolution Report says, how can MLS refereeing be so incompetent? Matt Davis says, how does MLS keep getting away with having this level of incompetent refs across the entire league? Every week, every match, it's something. Other leagues would not let this stand. I feel that MLS is seriously holding itself back from being a great league because of the refereeing. So a lot of people not happy with the refereeing. Actually, we have a few more too here. Cambo from Discord says, can we cancel VAR? And can I have an in-depth recap of what the ref was thinking throughout that game, which I think Jake has already done. And then one person calling for the referee whose name I still cannot pronounce, even though it was said 70 times yesterday, asking if he can be fired. I don't think he will be fired, but as Jake says, I'm sure his assignments in the playoffs will be strongly reconsidered. I thought it was one of the worst refereeing performances I've seen in a long time. I can't think of anything off the top of my head where I mean, it seems like we curse out the referees a lot, Sean, but this strikes me as probably the worst refereeing performance we've seen all season in a Revs game.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some bad ones this year, some of which have gone in the Revs' favor, many of which have gone against the Revs, but this was just a terrible one. And when you get a play like that wrong on VAR, it's so early on, you've just ruined the game. And that's just really frustrating. For me, watching a game like this, it just ruins the entertainment of watching the game, knowing that this red card has just completely changed the game, and you're not going to get to see a full 11-on-11 soccer game. I don't enjoy games watching a team get 30 shots on goal against a team that's just bunkering in the rest of the match. So yeah, the refereeing really did ruin this game. I am someone that generally is in favor of the idea of VAR, but it's been really disappointing to see how it's been implemented over the past 2 seasons and plays like that. And you shouldn't be getting yourself in a VAR play, like Jake was saying, that ends up getting overturned by the disciplinary committee later on in the week. It just doesn't make any sense. If you're going to VAR, you got to get the call right. And I just don't understand how the number of times, both in Revs games and in general in MLS games, we've seen them go to VAR and just get the call wrong.
Yeah, and another thing too is I don't know how it's going to get any better, because I feel like VAR has just muddied the waters so much more. It used to be, well, the referee saw something or didn't see something, or, in the heat of the moment, they just missed it. And, that ruined a game. But, I mean, now VAR is still not helping things. And if anything, is worsening these games. So I'm not sure how MLS can improve the quality of refereeing. It certainly seems to almost be going in the opposite direction, having the opposite effects. And in the case of yesterday, it completely changed the outcome of that game. I mean, it as Bruce Arena said in his post-game comments, it could have been a good game yesterday, but it wasn't. I wonder if they need to change to maybe more of an NFL type structure where teams can challenge a play, because it seems like, and another thing too, we're talking about the red card, but one thing that drives me absolutely insane is the play until, see what happens and then call offsides. I think that is the dumbest thing. And I understand why there's an incentive for assistant referees to keep their flags down until a play has concluded. But I think that's totally changed it's annoying for one thing. I think it takes away from the game to play out, a breakaway or something like that, for 10 seconds or 10 or 15 seconds, and then just to say, actually, none of that play mattered. I have a lot of issues with how VAR is being implemented, and I think a lot of people will echo that, not just because the Revs have lost a couple points yesterday because of it, but I'm not sure how it'll improve anytime soon. So.
No, I'm with you.
Randy LH also says, how freaking BS was that result? Pretty BS, I would say. I mean, you don't know how that game is going to play out, but, early goal, as you said, a depleted NYCFC squad. I think if there's no red card, I think the Revs at least take 1 point. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. That's a question later on. But anyway, Mike Kennedy asks us, did Arena take Caicedo 2 off too soon? Would having a big target forward keep NYC off balance? Or was it the right move given the early red? So, Sean, we'll get into the JF Caicedo sub really early on. I think he came off in about the 26th minute. He came off for Jaleel Anibaba.
21st.
21st minute. But, Sean, what do you think of that sub? Do you think that was the right move to make?
I do think it was the right move to make, and the only thing that surprised me was that it didn't come sooner. Especially when you're playing on a tight pitch like that and you really need to stay compact and you've got a lead, it's the right move to go out there and fix your back line. I think you needed to add another center back there, especially Andrew Farrell as your lone center back when it's not necessarily his natural position. He hasn't been playing there that long. And then having Brandon Bai and DeJuan Jones, 2 guys that are midfielders, you're just asking for trouble. I think they had to do that. Again, I like the game Caicedo was playing. It's unfortunate that it had to happen, but if you're going to take somebody out, I think, he's the guy that's probably not going to contribute much on defense. You have a guy in Gustavo Bo who can kind of create something out of nothing, so you kind of want to keep him out there. And then I don't think you want to take out Caicedo or Zahibo. I think you need them for defensive purposes too. You're obviously not going to take out Carles Hill. He's another guy that can create out of nothing. So it's either Caicedo or Pania. To me, it makes sense to take Caicedo out. You're going to be playing a lot more counter-attacking soccer, and you can use guys like Pania's pace. Again, really unfortunate for Caicedo, but to me that was the right move. And if Anibaba was perhaps ready to come on sooner, I would have thought he would be brought on sooner, if anything.
Yeah, and the other thing too about Juan Fernando Caicedo is that he can score goals, but he doesn't do a whole lot else. He needs people to help him set up plays. And, I think being down a man, if it was Teal Bunbury, maybe you keep Bunbury out there. But I wasn't shocked to see Juan Fernando Caicedo. I think you needed that second center back. They were pushing Zahibo back to kind of cover that space, but ultimately, I don't think that's the right move because then you're leaving Caicedo a little bit out to dry. So, you have the goal early. And, all things considered, it would have worked if it wasn't for that last minute penalty kick. We're here today talking about how Bruce Arena's subs were pretty amazing and, how he was able to maintain that 1 point. So I think, at that point in the game, 20th minute, 21st minute, whatever we're at, how are you going to keep 2 goals off the board for NYCFC? I think the answer to that is, bringing in a second center back there. I don't think Caicedo. I think you needed to sub someone off, and I think Caicedo just offered you the least amount out there compared to Carles Heel or Gustavo Bo or Christian Panier or someone like that. Although it should be noted that second sub, Gustavo Bo comes off for Juan Agudelo, which was a bit of an interesting one. Barbara S. wants our thoughts on that. Would you have subbed differently after that bogus red card, meaning the Caicedo sub? And also when they pulled Bo, she also asked us what we thought of Bo's play yesterday. He seemed to have less energy tonight. She adds Matt Turner was awesome, which goes without saying. Matt Turner was great. But Sean, what are your thoughts on Gustavo Bo and how he played yesterday, and if it was the wrong move to take him off so early?
Yeah, no, I like I said, I'm 100% on board with the first sub. The second 2 subs I was maybe less on board with. Especially if you're bringing on Agudelo for Gustavo Bo. I didn't think Agudelo had a particularly good game off the bench. I didn't think Bo had the best game he's ever had either. But he is one of those guys that all he needs is one chance to change a game. I think I would have kept him on longer. And if you were going to take him off, I maybe would have brought on a guy like Caldwell, who, as I've talked about before, is a guy that can go into that midfield, make the safe pass, and help your team keep possession. There's got to be a role for Scott Caldwell on this team. They extended his contract, and it just is surprising to me that he's not a guy that gets his way into this game. And even if it wasn't that first sub, I think I would have brought him on instead of Mancian in the 73rd minute, because I'm not really sure what Mancian adds to a game like this. I know you want to just get an extra defender back there, but just Mancian's been so poor for this team that, again, I would rather have an extra body like Scott Caldwell that can help clog up the midfield and make passes. So I wasn't too thrilled with either of those second 2 subs from Bruce Arena, and I don't think either of them worked out particularly well for the team.
Yeah, and there were a couple of chances late in the game from Juan Agudelo, and you got to think if those are Gustavo Bo, he finishes one of those chances. Your chances are going to be few and far between. And if you're gonna, you need someone who can make something out of nothing. That's Gustavo Bo. So to take him out in the 62nd minute, I thought was a bit interesting. I know he's maybe not a defensive player or whatnot, but maybe I did not notice he lacked energy, as Barbara said. Maybe he was tired or something to that effect. Maybe it was a little. There was a little bit more logic to that reason. But, I understand why you want to get Juan Agudelo in the game, too, because he can kind of play more in the midfield and he plays a little bit more defensively than a Gustavo Bo. I understand kind of that, but I think there was someone like Christian Pania that you could take off first and you could hold Bo until later on in the game where you take him out. So, Sean, what was your thought too about? I know you said you didn't like both, but do you think they went too defensive, bringing in Mancienne? I actually liked the move because I think at that point you're just going all out to protect that 1-1 draw. I didn't really have a lot of issue with that third sub at all, but it seems like you did.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with going defensive. I just don't think Mancienne, with the type of player that he is, and he's kind of slow at this point in his career. He gets in the way sometimes more than not. I get the logic behind it, but I just don't understand why a guy, again, like I said already, but why a guy like Caldwell doesn't get used in situations like this when you're trying to hold on to a lead and trying to maintain possession. He's a guy that can get stuck in and I think covers a lot more ground than some of the substitutions they made, and helps the team keep possession more. So I don't know. Mancienne came in and had 4 touches over the last 20-plus minutes of the game that he played. I don't know if Caldwell would have had more, but I think Caldwell could have had more of an impact.
Gotcha. So you're not against parking the bus. You just think it was the wrong move to make.
Exactly, and I'm not a fan of just piling on center backs as a way to park the bus necessarily, as opposed to bringing on defensive midfielders when you have that available option on the bench.
Gotcha. moving on, Adam McLean says, what do you think about starting a GoFundMe to pay pro referees to call games fairly, or maybe to support better ref training that was train wreck refereeing and not just the red card? He does also add that the next game is big. Are we screwed with yellow card accumulation with so many players out? And Tony De La Mea, assuming his suspension is not overturned, he will be missing the game. Wilfred Zahibo is out due to yellow card accumulation. Juan Agudelo is out due to yellow card accumulation. We also have another question from gboyd213 on Discord who says, now that Tony is suspended, who do you pair with Farrell next week? So, Sean, I'll go to you. Do you think the refs are in a bad position with 3 players missing, or do you think that since they are kind of maybe supporting players that you're not losing too much confidence going into Orlando?
Yeah, look, I maybe I'm not necessarily alone, but in a minority here, and I don't think you lose anything or much from going from Zahibo to Caldwell. I think if the Revolution do that, they'll be okay. Agudelo didn't start this game, and as I said, I don't think he played particularly well. I think the Revolution are just fine without him. The combination of missing the 2 of those guys leaves you particularly thin at the central midfield spot where Agudelo's been playing a lot lately. Certainly, there's really nobody else when if Caldwell or Caicedo were to get hurt. The De La Mea suspension, if the Revolution are missing him, I think that hurts. I do think that him and Farrell are the best pairing the Revolution have back there. I expect that to get overturned. But if it doesn't, Andy Baba's probably the one that slots back there based on the sub we saw in this game and based on how Mancien's played, if I were to guess. I think that hurts the Revolution a little bit if that's the case. But I think the Revolution still have enough to get a result in Orlando, even with those subs. It does just leave them, worryingly thin on defense. And, going into the game, too, as we talked about before, Farrell now is on yellow card watch and Carles Hilo is on yellow card watch. So if the 2 of them were to get a yellow card against Orlando, either of them getting a yellow card would mean that they were suspended for the next game. And certainly losing a guy like Carles Hilo or even losing a guy like Andrew Farrell, who's been so good since Bruce Arena took over, would be pretty devastating for the Revolution after the Orlando game.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point. I don't think they're going to miss a lot out of their starting lineup, but I do think they're going to be a little screwed on subs. I'm not sure who's coming off the game. You still have Diego. I would imagine Scott Caldwell is going to step in for Wilfred Zahibo. And then, but I think you'll miss Juan Agudelo coming off of the bench. I imagine Andy Baba is going to be moving in for Tony De La Mea. Are we on the same wavelength with Andy Baba over Mancien?
Yeah, and the only question I have is, do you recall Brian Wright for this game, given you have no real forward options if Bunbury doesn't make a miraculous recovery? And we did see Brian Wright score a fantastic goal this week. Well,
we could go do that, but I actually was going to go in another direction because I think you're missing kind of a midfield player because I don't know, Diego Fagundes kind of dropping back doesn't really appeal to me. Do you potentially call up Isaac Anking to maybe cover for the midfield and call him back up for one game? I think there are some options that they could go with. Brian Wright does make sense to me because you don't really have that striker on the bench with Teal Bunbury out, assuming Teal Bunbury is still out, and Juan Agudelo suspended. I guess Tayon Buchanan could play striker, but I don't think that really appeals to you too much. So I agree with you. I was going to go there in a second. Brian Wright, I do think could get a quick one-game call-up, number 77 there, because I don't know how many games Juan Fernando Caicedo has played 90 minutes either. I'd have to go back and check that out. But I think they're really low on the bench, and even if those guys don't get into the game, I don't think it's a bad idea to maybe call up Isaac Anking and Brian Wright. So we'll have to see how that happens. We have a couple comments here from MJ on Twitter. Have to upgrade from Agudelo in the next transfer window. His lead foot killed any chance to go ahead and steal 3, stating the obvious, but need to move on from Mancien as well. Too static out there, anti-defensive liability. He says that even though the Agudelo didn't knock in those 2 chances, the Revs were under assault, and we are lucky that Matt Turner is on. New York blew a lot of their chances, and we were lucky to be in it, which is a pretty fair statement. I don't think they will be able to move on from Juan Agudelo because I believe he has a multi-year contract, and he's at a $600,000 a year salary. So I do not expect him to be moving anywhere quickly, unless maybe, I don't know, if European interest picks up. Probably not, but I think Juan Agudelo is here for the long-term future. But he also has been playing pretty well. I know it was a bit of a tough game yesterday. He didn't finish his chances. His finishing has gone down from years past when he looked like a very stud striker. But a bit of a tough game in finishing. But I think he's coming into his own a little bit as a central midfield player. It's a bad game yesterday. Sean, we have one more question too, which is a bit of an interesting question that I thought was obvious at first, but I've actually thought about it a little bit more, and you can tell me why it's a stupid question. But Nearby Eclipse on Discord asks us, how much longer will Matt Turner still be a Rev? And originally I was going to say, well, I imagine his extension is 3 or 4 years, so I would say at least 3 or 4 years, and then maybe tack on a few years onto that. But is Matt Turner so good that he might get interest from teams in other countries? Could we potentially be seeing, because there was an Athletic article that said that Matt Turner could potentially play in the Premier League someday, and that's obviously high praise. That was from Kevin Hitchcock, the goalkeeping coach for the Revolution. So I mean, do you think it's possible that maybe Matt Turner is a transfer target from some teams in Europe? What are your thoughts there?
Look, I mean, right now, no. But the way he's playing, and if he keeps playing, again, he's only played just more than one full season worth of games, as I've said before. But the way he's playing right now is phenomenal. And if he keeps playing this way, and if he does it consistently, if he avoids, stupid fouls, you might be talking about him differently right now if he had gotten the red card the week before that he probably deserved. But he's been playing really well. His shot saving ability is phenomenal. If he goes the next season and makes it through to the summer and keeps playing at this level, and his starting position is never questioned, his distribution keeps improving, best case scenario, he might start to have interest as soon as next summer. So yeah, I don't know how long the Revolution will keep on holding on to him. The sky's kind of the limit as far as how his development goes. If he keeps developing at this rate, I think there's possibility that as soon as next summer you could start seeing some interest from him, because goalkeepers that good are hard to find. But with that said, again, he hasn't done this consistently over a very long basis. So we're really getting ahead of ourselves to kind of project that that's going to happen. But there's a lot of reason to be optimistic, and a lot of reason to think that he could have a long-term future with the Revs. And if he plays better than even better than he's playing now, he could have a long-term future somewhere over in Europe.
And I know that a lot of people have heard my expected goals to goals against differential stat, which I'm going to try to explain once again. But it's expected goals against minus goals against, actual goals against, and this measures basically how many projected goals a goalkeeper has stopped. And I've mentioned this a couple episodes in a row now about how Matt Turner is leading MLS in this category. Before the New York City FC game, he was at negative 8.29, which means he has stopped a projected 8.29 goals from going in. I just want to kind of read off a quick list. Tim Malea in 2017, Stefan Fry in 2018, Bill Hamid in 2014, Luis Robles in 2013, Nick Rimando in 2015. That's 5 goalkeepers. Those 5 goalkeepers in those 5 seasons are the only goalkeepers to have a higher differential than Matt Turner is having this season, according to American Soccer Analysis, which has been tracking this since 2011. So Matt Turner is having one of the greatest seasons of the decade for an MLS goalkeeper. And if you look at his number from last year, too, it was also impressive. Not nearly as impressive as he's doing this season, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it's about around 22nd on this list. So Matt Turner has turned in 2 very, very good seasons for the Revolution, and they mentioned in that Athletic article from last week that he's still pretty much a baby. He's still only, I think, 25 years old. He came into the sport a little bit later than most. He really didn't catch on until his college years. So, he has a lot of room to grow, it seems like. And, as time goes on, this looks like less and less of a fluke. I know there's a very short sample size, but I wouldn't be shocked if he gets some interest. Going back to the question, how much longer will Matt Turner be a Rev? If I'm putting in a guess, I'm going to say 3 more years. I think he plays out his extension, and then as that extension kind of comes up, I think the Revolution might sell him for a bit of a profit. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on, if you have a random guess on how long Matt Turner will still be a Rev. We still don't even know the contract details, but that I'm saying 3 years.
No, I think that's a realistic guess. I would go somewhere around there as well.
All right, and Sean, I think that actually kind of does it. I had Brian write down on my list of news to talk about, but if you haven't seen it yet, go look up that goal he had for Birmingham this week. He had a really nice assist last week. He had a really nice chip goal for the Legion this week. I think he has 4 goals now in the season, which it isn't a number that jumps off of the page, but he's certainly been coming into his own a little bit lately, and I believe it's a contract year for him. So it'll be interesting to see how the Revs handle him because he's certainly showing off his talent in USL. Sean, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off today?
No, it's just that, like you said, you got to check out that goal, and I think this is an opportunity for the Revolution going into this weekend to recall a couple guys from loan. And when you score a goal like what Brian Wright scored this week, your confidence has to be high. And you mentioned Juan Caicedo. He hasn't gone 90 minutes since June, and he's played very sparingly since then. So I think it would be asking a lot to expect him to go 90 minutes. And I don't really know if Bunbury's not back. I don't know who else you could put out there. So it makes every bit of sense to me to give Brian Wright a shot to come back and really have a good chance of getting minutes in that game.
Yeah, it's his first game since July 18th against the Vancouver Whitecaps, where he has had 6 consecutive games where he's played less than 23 minutes or less, so mostly coming off of the bench. He played 62 minutes against the Whitecaps, 61 minutes in a 2-2 draw against DC United, 82 minutes against the Colorado Rapids in Colorado on that July 4th/July 5th game. And then, he had 90 minutes against Houston Dynamo. That was his last full 90 minutes. That was June 30th. He has 2 other games in MLS where he's played all 90 minutes. The Atlanta United game in April, and then the 6-1 massacre in May in the waning days of Brad Friedel. So, I would not be shocked to see a couple call-ups because they're going to be a little bit thin on the bench end. As you mentioned, there's a couple of guys on yellow card watch that might leave us might be more impactful in Andrew Farrell and Carly Seal. That I think we might be in a little bit more of a bind against Salt Lake if those two see yellow on Saturday. So Sean, where can people find you on Twitter?
You can find me at Sean L. Donahue.
And you can follow us at Revolution Recap. Also, please like our Revolution Recap page on Facebook. Please leave us a review also on iTunes or wherever you are listening. The Revs will try to start up another unbeaten road streak next week as they travel to Orlando City in a key matchup for Eastern Conference playoff spot. Orlando is currently sitting on the outside looking in, and obviously a win over New England would be huge for their chances. So the Revs need to kind of step on this bug before they catch up to us. We'll be back next week to break it all down. I believe, actually, I should have ran this by you before. Sean, are you doing a podcast next week?
Planning to, as long as I can find a co-host.
Okay. Sean is planning to be here next week to break it all down. I will be at a wedding, and so I will not be here, but Sean will be here with a mystery guest, possibly. Until then, thank you all for listening, and go Revs.